Get a load of this guy. This is Daniel Charles Howard. He's a former Idaho State Trooper, and he's on trial right now for allegedly murdering his estranged wife. At the time of her death, they were apparently in the midst of a divorce and fighting over about a $2 million marriage estate. Now, he alleges that she unalived herself. The state, however, alleges that he used some of his skills from his time in the police force to end her life prematurely.
Evidence will show that Kendi died of asphyxiation. That's the result of a carotid restraint. Something Dan knew how to do.
Now, trial began on March 4th and was expected to wrap up early this week. But something tells me he was not feeling too great about his chances by this point in the trial. You see, he's been out on a property bond since December 20th, 2023. And he decided this last Friday night that it was a great time to go on a little vacation. So he apparently booked a flight out of Spokane International Airport. Unfortunately for him, though, he was arrested by Spokane International Airport police at around 10:40 p.m. on Friday. And he was then booked into Spokane County Jail as a fugitive. One thing that this does for him concerns the bond that was allowing him to stay out of jail until the end of trial. You see, in order for a criminal defendant to be out of jail leading up to trial, they first have to qualify for and then put up a monetary bond. But the thing is, money isn't the only condition that is required for a bond. It also requires that the defendant agree to not try to run away and also to show up at all court appearances. If the defendant does appear to be a flight risk or is a danger to the public, courts are not going to allow that defendant to stay out on any kind of bond. And once someone is actually out on bond, there are penalties for bail jumping. Not only do they forfeit what they put up for the bond, but there can also be additional charges added to their underlying crime or crimes. And when the case does eventually go to trial, that's all admissible as evidence of consciousness of guilt. Now, we've talked about this a number of times on the channel. Most recently, it was in the context of James and Jennifer Crumbley, the parents of Ethan Crumbley, also known as the Oxford school shooter. They left their home basically immediately after the shooting happened in November 2021. In their defense, they argued that they left days before they were ever charged, and they left because they were getting death threats, so they say. And they also said that they were acting on advice of their legal counsel. But that admittedly started to look a bit less convincing, since days later, their attorneys actually became aware that their clients were being charged and that the police were actively looking for them. And honestly, I have a hard time believing that any attorney, unless they are literally like the worst of all attorneys, would have said, yeah, it's fine. Stay hidden even though the police are actually looking for you right now. But at least they had the argument that they had left days before they were ever charged and that they stayed within the state. They really didn't go that far. Then there was Caitlin Armstrong from Austin, Texas. She was ultimately convicted of murdering Mo Wilson, a professional cyclist and alleged romantic rival. After being questioned by the police, Armstrong flew from Texas to New York, where she apparently got access to her sister's passport. She then used that passport to fly to Costa Rica, where she got plastic surgery, seemingly to make herself undetectable by the authorities. She was ultimately caught and extradited back to the US and then convicted of murder. Like the Crumbleys, Armstrong was at least able to argue that she went to Costa Rica before she was ever charged, and she also said that she liked to travel to exotic places for yoga retreats. And hey, medical tourism is also a thing. But the problem was apparently Armstrong is not a quitter, because even that didn't stop her from trying to escape yet again, this time hopping a fence to try to get out of jail just weeks before her murder trial. She got about a mile down the road before she was ultimately apprehended. And when this all came in at trial, this looked damaging as hell to her case. But here, in Howard's case, you have someone who is literally in the middle of trial trying to fly somewhere to get out of Dodge. And on top of that, Howard's bond conditions actually apparently included a specific requirement that he stay at least 2 miles away from any airport. Given that he was arrested at the airport, he's obviously in clear violation of his bond conditions, and this is going to bring him big trouble in court. From the reporting, I can't tell where the actual destination was, whether it was domestic or international. Either way, it looks bad, but if it's international, I would say that he's probably super cooked. And regardless, every time something like this happens, it automatically becomes admissible in court. And that's because, like I said, this becomes usable as evidence of consciousness of guilt. A criminal defendant tries to leave, especially without notifying anyone, and the prosecution is going to be able to say that that is because the defendant is trying to run away from accountability. And each time the defense attorney has to twist him or herself into pretzel knots to try to explain to the jury why this isn't actually what this looks like. So undoubtedly, the jury is going to hear about this one. And truth be told, I haven't followed this case at all, so I really don't know where the evidence falls in terms of guilt or non-guilt, but I would imagine that if his case wasn't looking grim before now, it sure is at this point. But those are my thoughts. What do you think? Does this sound to you like shady behavior on the part of the defendant, or is there some sort of plausible explanation that I might be missing here? Let us know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this, or at least found it interesting or informative. And if you did, I would love it if you could hit the like button. It does help us with the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can find out when the next video is uploaded. See you in the next one.